Hello students and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this lecture, we will be looking into the economic survey. It is about to be presented. It is presented a day before the budget. So just before it is presented, we'll look into economic survey. We'll see how it is prepared and why it matters. So why it matters with respect to the economy we'll see, but to tell you with respect to your exam it matters a lot because it gives a lot of fodder for the paper setter to ask questions on that. That's point number one. Point number two, if not directly, indirectly in mains as well, at the same time in the economic survey, whatever the schemes and things are being mentioned becomes really important for your paper. That's one thing. Another additional point, if I talk about the economic survey from the point of view of the examination, is the fact that economic survey is such a beautiful document. It comes up with such beautiful analysis and beautiful reasoning. At the same time, some new concepts and new terminologies are coined in the economic survey, which you should know with respect to prelims. At the same time, you can utilize that in your answer writing as well as essay writing, and of course for the personality test, of course you can use it. Having said that, let us get started and understand what is economic survey. So if you have to understand, let's look at it in contrast with respect to budget. In budget, what happens? You forecast what is going to happen. Of course, budget talks about what has happened previously in the last year, what was the revenue and expenditure, but the major focus is what is going to happen in the future, from where the money is going to come and from where the money will be spent. It is the forecast of the coming year. That is why budget this year will be what? It will be budget 2025-26. But then what is economic survey? Economic survey is the bureau of what has happened. It gives you the actuals. This budget, majorly the main focus is the estimates of the fiscal year to come, whereas when you talk about the economic survey, it gives you the actuals. So economic survey is going to talk about 2024 and 2025 fiscal year. Okay, so this is what it does. That means it is doing what? It is doing a review, a comprehensive review of India's economic performance. Okay. So this is major difference. At the same time, here is the estimates of revenue expenditure. Here it's not majorly revenue expenditure. Here it is the performance. How the economy has performed, how different sectors have performed, how different fields of different sectors have performed, what went wrong, what went right, what can be further enhanced. Everything is going to be talked about in the economic survey, and it is prepared, remember, by the Department of Economic Affairs under the supervision of CEA, that is Chief Economic Advisors. And not just this performance analysis, after analyzing, you can come to a conclusion as in suggestion, feedback, way forward, solutions. So it also does that. It provides recommendations to address the issues that might be there and to further improve by scope of improvement for further growth of Indian economy. Now, what all does it cover? It basically covers the critical sectors such as agriculture, industry and services. Now, agriculture is the primary sector. Industry means secondary sector. Right? Services means tertiary sector. Now, I have written here critical sector. So, if this is critical sector, what other sectors are there? In fact, this is the entire Indian economy, right? But yes, there are two more sectors which are there, which we generally don't read in the Indian economy as such, but those are still present, and it is important for you to know for your prelims at least. That is, primary means first, secondary second, tertiary means third. There is a fourth sector known as the quaternary sector, and the fifth sector known as the quinary sector. So quaternary sector talks about research and development, and quinary sector is nothing but the top level decision making, where the top level decision making happens. So where does the top level decision making happens? At the bureaucracy and the government level. So this will include, see, this R&D includes your scientists, researchers, etc. Quinary sector, top level decision making, will include your bureaucrats, civil servants. When you get selected, it will be you all. At the same time, the MPs, MLAs, so on and so forth. Now, staying on to this topic, it further covers key economic indicators. Very important, because these are the indicators that tell us how the economy is doing. Number one is the GDP growth. So number one, GDP growth, then inflation, employment rate, and fiscal deficit, among other things, but these are very major things which tells you the health of the economy. So let us take them one by one. First, let's start with the GDP growth. GDP growth. Now GDP growth, basically you will calculate GDP growth with the help of the GDP growth rate. Now this GDP growth rate can be of two types. One will be nominal, one will be real. Now real GDP is very important. Of course nominal GDP is also fine, but real GDP is very important. So what is the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP? So what happens is GDP is generally calculated every year, per year, for a particular fiscal year. So when you are calculating GDP of a particular year based on the prices of the goods and services prevailing in that year itself, that's a nominal GDP. Okay? So when you calculate GDP of a particular year, let's say the year 2024-25. So you are calculating it for this year, and which prices you are using? You are using the prices of the same year 2024-25. That means you are calculating the nominal GDP. Then what is real GDP? If you want to calculate real GDP of 2024-25, the prices of the goods and services which you will take into account will not be of the same year, but rather it will be of the base year, whichever year is the base year at that time. So it will be of base year. Let's say 2011 is the base year, so it will be prices based on the prices of 2011. So when you calculate a GDP of a particular year based on the prices of the base year, then that GDP is the real GDP. So what is the difference? The difference is very simple. If you take into account the base year prices, you are accounting for the inflation that is there. Here the inflation is added. So your GDP will look inflated. The production would actually be less, but the value of GDP will come high because the prices of the things have gone up. Let me make you understand with the help of an example. So you are calculating the GDP, let's say of 2024-25, and what has happened is, let's say the entire economy in 24-25 produced 1 pen. Right? So 1 pen is produced. Now if the base year, let's say, is 2011. In 2011, the rate of that pen was rupees 100. Right? And in 2024, you have produced that one single pen. That means GDP is what? GDP of 2024-25 is rupees 100 only. But the pen which was of 2011, of 100 rupees in 2011, after 14 years, its cost has tripled. Now that pen costs you rupees 300 in 2024-25. So if you want to calculate the nominal GDP, what will be the nominal GDP if the country has produced just one single pen? The nominal GDP would be rupees 300. And we may think, oh my God, the GDP has tripled. From 100 it has become 300. But what is the reality? The GDP is absolutely the same. Earlier also in 2011, let's say in 2011 also, 1 pen was produced. In 2020, so the GDP, the real GDP would have been 100. In 2024 also 1 pen is produced. Nominal GDP has increased because the price of the pen has increased, but the real GDP remains the same because real GDP takes into account the prices prevailing in the base year. I hope that is absolutely clear. So this real GDP accounts for the inflation. Nominal GDP does not. Inflation is included. That's why the number looks inflated. Real GDP is the real deal. I hope that is clear. Now having said that, inflation is, now coming on to inflation. So here the inflation is accounted for. Now let us understand what this inflation is. Of course, in simple sense, you can simply say that inflation is nothing but increase in the prices, right? But in UPSC, in general sense, is not enough. You need to specifically know in detail as well. So I'll explain you how. So if you say inflation is nothing but the increase in prices, and I give you a question that there has been an increase in the prices of onions. So does that mean that there is inflation in the Indian economy? Not necessarily. Okay. Why not necessarily? It's simple because it can so happen that the prices of onions have gone up, but it is also possible that the prices of tomatoes, other vegetables and other things have gone down. So overall in the economy, the prices are falling down. So need not necessarily be inflation. Then what does inflation mean? Inflation means, remember this, and probably if you want, write it down. Inflation means a sustained increase in the price of a basket of goods and services. Sustained increase in the price of a basket of goods and services. Now understand this in detail. A basket of goods and services means not just one or two commodity, but the basket of goods and services together as a whole. The price of that thing should have gone up. That's one thing. Second, it needs to be sustained. What does this mean? This means that it cannot happen that today the cost went up, tomorrow the cost went down, again the cost went up. So in these 3 days you decide there is inflation. No, it needs to be sustained. For at least a quarter of two, that sustenance of that level of price has to be there in order to say that inflation is there. And at the same time, the price needs to be increased for the basket of goods and services and not one single commodity or two or few commodities, because that need not necessarily mean increase in price level. Why? Because the basket of goods and services, it consists of hundreds of goods and services. So what happens is the urban basket consists of 460 goods and services. 460 goods and services. So what can happen is 300 goods and services can go down and 160 can go up. And overall it's a fall in prices. Or even it is possible that 160 go down and 300 go up, but they go up with a small amount, they go up with a large amount, so again they go down with a large amount, so again there can be a fall. So the net impact is very important, the net effect. If the net effect of all the goods and services in the basket is reduction in prices, there will be no inflation. So you need to look at the net impact of the entire basket of goods and services. Okay? So if I am saying just one good or service or just onions, maybe the remaining 459 products have gone down or some stayed stable and many others gone down. So it needs to be the net impact. That means sustained increase in the price of a basket of goods and services. So urban basket has 460 goods and services, rural basket has 448 goods and services. Next is the employment rate. It of course also talks about the employment rate, which is a very important thing, especially in the last decade or two, where unemployment has been so high, unemployment rate has been high, and India is said to be undergoing, India is still growing, the GDP is growing over and above 6%, but still there is a problem. What is the problem we are facing? The problem of jobless growth. Means the growth is there, but jobs are not there. Okay? Growth is there, but jobs are not there. So unemployment rate is also included. Now employment rate is also included, or unemployment rate, you can subtract it from 100 and get the result. So what is unemployment? Now many of you who are watching might be preparing for UPSC Civil Services examination or any other examination for matter. Some of you might be doing graduation. So my question is to all the UPSC Civil Services aspirants who are studying full time for UPSC, not doing any job. My question for you is, are you unemployed? Think about it. You want, pause the video, answer it. Are you unemployed? You may say yes, but as per the government data of the unemployment rate, you will not be included in the unemployment rate. Why? Because as per the government's definition of the unemployment rate, you are not a part of it, because the definition says that a person who is able to work and willing to work but still does not get the job is considered as unemployed. So you are able to work, but are you willing to work? You are not willing to work presently because you are preparing for civil services examination. So you are willingly not taking or hunting or searching for a job and not taking a job. So that is also a type of unemployment, that is voluntary unemployment. That is known as a voluntary unemployment, but that is not a part of the unemployment rate data. Then what is the part of the unemployment rate data? Those people who are able to work, but are not able to get the job, these people are coming under the unemployment rate data released by the government. So remember, you are not unemployed as such, but yes, you are voluntarily unemployed. But this data consists of involuntary unemployment. I hope that is absolutely clear. Okay. Now, another thing that is mentioned in the economic survey is the fiscal deficit. So what is this fiscal deficit? Again, it has everything to do with the expenditure that you are doing and the revenue you have generated. So if I have to tell you the simple formula for fiscal deficit, let's say FD, is given by total expenditure minus there's no need to write total here, minus, simply you can write minus revenue receipts plus, not capital receipts completely, but non-debt creating capital receipts. Okay. This is the fiscal deficit. Why non-debt creating capital receipts or not the entire capital receipts? Because the capital receipts which are debt creating are what? They are simply loans. So you cannot include loans. If you include loan, this will match this. Because remember, if 105 rupees needs to be spent and your total revenue was 100 only and you are taking 5 rupees as loan, so it becomes complete 105, because if you are spending 105, you have to give 105, right? So the government has to get the money from somewhere, and the final last resort, apart from printing money, the resort before printing money is what? Borrowing. So if you borrow, take loan, then it will always be zero. Fiscal deficit will become meaningless. So you exclude the part of debt creating capital receipts and you include only the part of non-debt creating capital receipts in order to get the actual performance of the economy. So this is also given in the economic survey. Now this economic survey is divided into two main sections. In fact, it comes in two different PDFs on the ministry's website. It is section A and section B. So section A talks about the economic status of different trends. Basically, what has happened, how much is the growth rate, what was the growth rate of different sectors, service sector, how has it performed, industrial sector, how it has performed, agricultural sector or primary sector, how it has performed, all those objectives. So a lot of numbers and all and facts and figures you will be finding over here. When it comes to part B, it talks about socio-economic issues like social sector schemes, education, health, so on and so forth. So education, health, poverty, unemployment, social security, climate change, all these things it talks about. What has been done, what has been the trend, what can be done further. The more conceptual, logical solutions, advices or the way forward you will find over here. This part is very beautifully present for you to utilize in your mains. You can utilize the first part also with respect to facts and figures. Of course, you can start some of the answers with respect to that. But this one is even more important, but you cannot, with UPSC, it is also considered as the unpredictable public service commission. So you cannot leave any part, you have to do both, but in different details, because here there will be too many factual data, too much detail you don't have to go into. Okay, so the second part consists of socio-economic issues like education, health, social sector schemes, etc., etc. Of course, projections will also be given, but majorly it consists of the actuals that have already taken place. Now, the theme of this year's economic survey is with respect to more and more liberalization, deregulation. Now, that has been the general trend with respect to the economy. It has it has become more and more liberalized. Now, how is it prepared? It is not a matter of thinking too much with respect to where the money and all will come from. No, you simply have to collate the data first from different ministries and compile it, produce it in different graphs, charts, so on and so forth, and look at the data and then give the suggestions. So the chief economic advisor does this, along with a team of economists and analysts will be helping them. They collect the data from different ministries and departments and bodies, etc. And of course, international organizations, from wherever you can get the data, international, if there is a comparison, you need international data from international bodies, so on and so forth. All the data is collected, collated, compiled, and then represented, and then subsequent suggestion, etc. Interpretation of the data is there, conclusion from that data is arrived, and then suggestions from that data is taken out and given as a report. Okay. Now, once it is completed, of course, as I said, it is presented a day before the budget is announced. Okay. Once it is presented, then what happens is the chief economic advisor holds a press conference. Press conference. Why? To discuss what has been the key findings. And whatever question the press, the media would have, the chief economic advisor would answer that particular question. Okay. Now, what is the importance of the economic survey? If you look at the economic survey, you will find that it is actually a very unbiased document. That adds on to the beauty of this document, very unbiased. Especially, see, one thing is because what has happened, you are mentioning that only, and for every sector. So everything is in the open. So it is a very clear and unbiased assessment of the economy. Once that assessment, that data and that suggestions are there, it helps the policy makers to make informed decisions. If they are telling that in this sector the investment is not working well, in this sector it is working well, or let's say in scheme X it's not working well, in scheme Y is working well, and both the schemes are for poverty alleviation, so you may start spending more over here. So it is helping the policy maker to take more and better informed decisions. At the same time, it is of course a tool as well, pre-budget tool for evaluating what? Economic progress and the future growth. It helps, it gives you a line that if this was the growth rate, what projection, what estimation can be there in the future. You know, when we talk about India having a double-digit growth, it's not that one fine day we woke up and we said we will have double-digit growth randomly. No, it is based on the data which is present and available with us. That is what is provided for the economic survey of the preceding year, so that we can target for the subsequent, the immediate future and the coming future years of the Indian economy. Of course, policymakers are impacted in a positive way, or rather you can say it helps them in a positive way to take decisions with respect to the policies. Apart from that, one more thing is it also takes into account a lot of international commitments for India with respect to, if you talk about, let's say, climate. So here the word climate was also mentioned, I believe. Yes, climate change. So climate change, India has its own independent nationally determined contribution. At the same time, Paris Agreement, this, that. So with respect to those commitments, where we are going wrong, where we are doing well, how can we do better? Well, at the same time, it goes so much in depth of the analysis as to advise some beautiful things. For example, one of the previous economic surveys said that India is a net exporter of water. Now, this is such an important thing to mention. Why India is a net exporter of water? Because India is exporting goods which are, water intensive, which require huge amount of water to be produced, and India is importing goods which doesn't require much water to be produced. So you are exporting goods which required, let's say, 10 trillion tons of water, and you are importing goods which require only 5 trillion tons of water to be produced. So that means what? You are exporting a net of 5 trillion tons of water. So India becomes what? India becomes a net exporter of water. Such an important thing. And imagine if you write these lines on concepts in a question or an essay on water scarcity. And water scarcity is one of the biggest challenges that India is presently facing. In fact, the entire world is facing in general, and India in particular. Right? So this is what comes out of it, which then the policymakers, the government, the business persons, the businesses around can utilize it for their benefit. And of course, guys, you can utilize it for your examination. So that's about it from our end. Now the economic survey will be launched, and subsequently the budget. So as and when they are launched, we will be coming up again with live sessions wherein we dissect both the documents. Thank you so much.